Well, welcome to the Beyond Church Raising Leaders podcast and this final episode in a special series of episodes called Our Sabbatical Story. My name is Rachel and I'm here with my husband Luke. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning, Rachel. Pleased to be here. And did you mention it's episode 8 of 8?
Well, I was getting to that, but thank you for gazumping me. Episode 8, the final episode. And if you haven't listened to the other episodes, then this episode is probably not of much use to you. So,
It'll be great.
I mean, sure, it'll be great to hear us.
To make it better is to go back to the first episode and listen all the way through.
Do the whole journey with us.
Yep, it'll take you about 8 hours. Road trip while you're on holidays, going up to
that's a good idea.
holiday destination.
Christmas holidays. This is something that you can consume in the Christmas holidays, which will help point you back to Jesus, I think. So speaking of which, we're talking about the Christmas holidays because I was going to mention that today is the 7th of December and we are recording this final podcast episode in this series just over 3 months after coming back to work.
It sounds like a long time.
I know. Post-sabbatical. So quick catch up for those who insist on not listening to the first 7 episodes.
Insist on missing out on the cream of the
juice
content. Yep.
We took 2 months this year for our first ever sabbatical, July and August. We officially returned to work on Sunday, September 3, which was Father's Day of 2023 in Australia. Mm-hmm. And here we are in December, and we've intentionally left it until now to record this final episode. We released episode 7 yesterday, I think, but it was recorded some time ago, and we kind of deliberately left it. Well, I'll tell you why I left it. I didn't want to record this final episode because there's been some things in the works post-sabbatical which were inspired by the events of episode 7, which we talked about it there being kind of like a catalytic moment there, which just kind of was a God moment, which inspired some quick decision making and some forward planning. So we've done a whole bunch. Like, I honestly cannot believe what's happened in the last 3 months. And so in my mind, I thought that there'd be some things which we could maybe announce or talk about that would be wrapped up in a nice little neat bow.
Yeah.
For this final episode.
For sure.
So that's Rachel, the planner. Her desire and dreams and goals. However, God in his infinite wisdom does not let me have what I like sometimes, which is everything all neatly tied up in a bow. And so I think sometimes with me especially, it's one of the ways that he reminds me that he's the actual boss, is that he shows his goodness and glory at the last minute.
The 11th hour God.
Yes. And so I think that's just a sign that, you know, it's not actually about the detail of the things that we're working on and dreaming of and planning for the future. And what it's pushed me back to is when we came back from the sabbatical, last episode we talked about how we planned our re-entry, and we did pretty much get to follow our re-entry, and we just took our time to meet with people slowly and just hear from them. And do you remember that we asked them each, like the key people that we met with for the first time, we asked them each the same question. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. So instead of asking them initially what's been happening in the life of the church or ministry, effectively the question was, what was it? Like, I'm just trying to frame it. It's effectively...
what's God been doing in you? Or
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
Or how have you grown? But it was all about them as a person. The heart of it was about them as a person and about like their relationship with God. What have they been pursuing and seeking God for?
I think it was like, what's God been doing in your life? That was the question.
Yeah.
And every one of them had an immediate and thoughtful response.
Yeah.
Which was quite powerful for us, knowing that the big takeaway for them was their own personal growth. In fact, we had our end of year team Christmas party this week, and a lot of the reflections back to us were from our team about us were about how thankful they were that we were the kind of leaders that were encouraging them to be growing in their relationship with God and in their ministry and in their gift. And as a leader, you want people to be growing, and you're often not exactly sure how well you're doing in that area. However, I think the win for me was hearing that reflected back to us was that they were thankful that they had experienced a significant season of growth in their own life this year, which was our big hope and dream for the year for them.
Well, I mean, I remember being blown away that first week back at work when we were, like, we thought we were so cool, I think, asking this question, like, this is evidence of what God's been doing in us, that this is the first question that we're going to ask. But to have them so immediately respond because they had been digging deep in their own relationship with God and, you know, relying on him in new ways and learning to trust him in new ways, that they just poured out of them the spiritual growth that they'd been through. And that was so encouraging, because none of what they were talking about was about the detail of what had been happening at church, or, you know, who was there or who wasn't there, or how many new people, or how things went, or activity, or, you know, any of that. It was all, you know, what God's been doing in my heart and my life. So anyway, I point to that because we did kind of come back, like, we were aware, I think, that coming back to activity and routine, and we'd had this richly rewarding experience that was just so unusual, so different from anything that we'd ever experienced before, that we didn't want to lose, you know, the heart or the essence of some of the things that we'd won in that time by taking that rest. Like, there's some things that you just don't win unless you rest. Isn't that an interesting thought?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's quite a common biblical theme that God's at work in winter or rest or night. You know, while we rest, God continues to build. So I just think that's, you never get to see that unless you're willing to rest or step away or put down your own tools and allow God to build in spite of you. So I think that's one of the big wins of the sabbatical was the intentionality around allowing ourselves to look at the God stuff and God's activity in the world as opposed to our efforts and what they've achieved. So, yeah, and to do it for such a long period of time means that it literally had to have been God at work outside of our effort. Yeah, so it is an interesting thought.
Well, I don't think I'd considered it. I don't think I'd had a revelation of it before the sabbatical. And in fact, I'm reminded that I used to fight against that lyric in that song that everybody loves about, even when you...
He's working.
Yeah,
he's
even
working.
when you're doing something, he's working. And I was like, well, hang on, God rested on the seventh day. And I think I've got a broader understanding now of, you know, God is always at work, but he modelled rest to us, like right at the very beginning of creation. Like the very first thing that he modelled to us was creativity, and then the second thing that he modelled was rest. And so that's pretty important. That means both creativity and rest. So anyway, we came back and we started... I'm not sure that we've kept saying this so much over the last, you know, couple of months, but I know that we were really intentional at the beginning, and I don't think the heart has disappeared, just maybe the gimmicky phrase has disappeared, but we were saying a lot post-sabbatical me. And the essence of that was we wanted to not lose hold of the things that we felt like were like the new us, I guess.
Yep.
Because we wanted the sabbatical experience to have produced transformation and change in us. And so we would come back to work, we'd be walking around the office, we'd go, oh, post-sabbatical me would say this, or post-sabbatical me is going to be this. And so my first question to you this morning is, what were the things that you were coming back to work saying in your mind or even out loud about the person you were going to be as post-sabbatical you, which you wanted to be different to pre-sabbatical you?
I think the big one after, you know, I tend to like to simplify thoughts down to something that I can, take a hold of in one breath. So,
Which I don't.
yeah, I really felt as though the big takeaway in terms of change for me immediately post sabbatical, and I think it's developed over the last 3 months, which I might speak to later, but really coming straight out of the sabbatical, the big thing that I felt God was doing in my life and saying to me was about the pace at which I would be at work in all areas of life, family and ministry, leadership, was that I really felt like God was wanting me to not rush. So I think I might have mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, that the post-sabbatical me, as you've reminded me of that phrase, post-sabbatical me was not going to be rushed, or was not going to rush, and was not going to be pushed by circumstances or by people. And I also wouldn't be a leader who would rush others or push others. And that was something that I would commonly do. I would, push and demand that things would be accomplished within, I don't know, they would necessarily, I certainly wouldn't have said they were unrealistic timeframes when I was setting them pre-sabbatical, but maybe they were unrealistic. So I felt as though that was a big post-sabbatical me shift, that I would not allow, I felt like God didn't want me to be the kind of leader that was rushed or was rushing others or was being pushed or pushing others, and to not allow the circumstances in my life or the people in my life to put that on me. So to be, strong in that resolution, to be a person that was measured in activity and, conscious of the pace of things. So I certainly wasn't like that pre-sabbatical. So that was one of my big takeaways, probably the biggest, among other. We've talked about many of the other things that we've taken away, but in terms of what my activity would look like post-sabbatical, that would be it. If you could possibly say, what if someone was to describe you or the difference in you post-sabbatical,
rather than activity.
Yeah, what would you like them to say about you?
Yeah.
Well, I'd love them to say, "Oh wow, Luke doesn't seem to be as rushed or as pushy." Or doesn't seem to allow circumstances to, modify his behaviour. He doesn't follow the demands of the circumstances, but he sets, his own pace. So that was one of the things I would have liked to have held on to post-sabbatical.
Yeah.
Are you going to give us your post-sabbatical me?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because I was going to say nearly the same thing, because rush certainly, when I was thinking about it, rush certainly was there on my list, and wanting to hold on to the revelation that, like, time is outside of God. Well, it's not outside of God, but the way God measures time is different to the way we measure time as humans. And so I had a growing revelation of how God can, the way we see God can sometimes look like nothing happens for a long period of time, and then everything can change in a moment. And so when I'm tempted to get frustrated with people and either their own growth in their skill or their development or even their spiritual growth, and think, oh, come on, guys, like, we've been at this a long time now. We can grow in this area. Or we don't still function at this level of maybe spiritual immaturity anymore, or whatever it is. The thing is that I'm wanting to rush people towards, like, maturity and growth. I think post-sabbatical me, I was learning to be much more loving toward people and trusting God. For me, it was all about trusting God. So trusting that God is the one who does the work in people's hearts, and he can bring change in a moment. And it's only through people feeling as though they're loved and, genuinely cared for by us as God's representatives on earth, but also their own relationship with God, that they will ever grow in maturity, and then God can accelerate that in a moment. So probably the two things for me were actually the the non-rush is like you're saying, it's a helpful thing that you can say in your mind to slow yourself down if you're, like, we're both very next step kind of people. Like, what's next? And so understanding that, so the non-rush thing is a helpful thing for that. But really for me, it was all about trusting God, because I had experienced like a total transformation in the depth of my trust in God in all areas, that he can be trusted. And because there'd been so many messages over and over again through the circumstances of the sabbatical about just being prepared to wait and let God be the one to bring the answer, because when God brings the answer, it's a miracle. And when we bring the answer, it's just all in our own strength, and there's nothing that points to God about it. So it's about trusting God. And I think the other little thing for me was what I really didn't want to lose was the experience of God's closeness and presence in moments, often and throughout the day. And that's really hard to hold on to when you just get into a flow and a rhythm of activity and routine. So, yeah, it was about wanting to create room, I guess, in the day-to-day to experience God's presence.
Cool. Great.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of what the 3 months has looked like before we go, because I'm gonna finish with, how well do you think you've held to that resolve for you not to rush, for me to trust in God and experience him in small moments. But in the meantime, there's been 3 months of activity. There's been a slow return to a new normal. Yeah.
A slow return to a new normal. I would argue that it's been it's been a fast return to a new abnormal.
Yeah, because actually, well, let me talk about this, because we talked about that catalyst moment in the last episode, and I wanted to check whether I'd actually journaled.
Oh, the journal. Well, guess what?
You've got some journal.
Well, I thought I might take a leaf out of your book and I might make a little journal article myself, entry myself, and I've got something here for you later.
Okay, well, good. So, because last time we were talking about that board meeting. Yes. We were talking about the board meeting where we had to kind of talk about how, and everybody in our world knows this now, that the board meeting was really about the fact that our church is heading into a belt-tightening season for 2024.
Like the rest of the world?
The rest of the world. Hashtag cost of living crisis, hashtag high interest rates, etc., etc.
Well, thankfully they were on hold last week.
This week.
Come on.
Anyway, so all of that to say, what we came back to post-sabbatical when we looked at those reports, the financial situation, etc., is when we realised that we would have to make some difficult decisions about what things would look like financially in our church world that we lead for next year. And
right.
That's not an unusual story we've learnt now, with a bit of time to process, across business, church world, household budgets, everywhere.
Life.
It's just one of those seasons. So we got through that board meeting, and here's what I've written about that. I said, so back to the board meeting. I've written this a few months ago. By the grace of God, it actually went without a hitch. We presented our sabbatical summary, went through the business, and somehow managed to get away with acknowledging that things are not looking good financially and that there will be difficult decisions to make when preparing the budget, and leave it at that. But the following day, so this is still the final week of the sabbatical, we began to realise that something had shifted in us. The shock moment of seeing the poor financial position had catalysed some of the momentum we hadn't realised we needed. Here I was feeling a little sad that we had had this wonderful experience over the past 2 months, but that nothing seemed like it would really change very quickly. Then, bam! Now we knew things had to change.
Hope you all caps the bam, did you?
I sure did, yeah, and exclamation mark.
I can tell.
We still had no idea what they were going to look like, but it was like there was a Holy Spirit decision-making power which had begun to descend on us. I really liked that sentence when I reread it this morning. A Holy Spirit decision-making power. which had why do I keep saying begun to descend on us. So we just went into action that final week of the sabbatical, didn't we?
I think we're still in that season of action.
We certainly are. That's where, like, I was hoping that all of that would be wrapped up and we'd be able to say this, and this has happened. But it's actually been a bit more of a roller coaster than that.
It's been very much a roller coaster.
How's it been for you?
Are you asking me now about? Is this like the last little section that we're having? No, this is just a little ad lib.
I'm asking you about the roller coaster. What have been some of the emotional highs and lows that you've experienced in the last 3 months in this? Because I would describe this as a period of lots of activity. And I've said later on in the journal that it was like immediately we decided to sell a car that we'd been umming and ahhing about and buy a different car. And then we decided to, sell an investment and work towards a goal that we'd had during the sabbatical. And we realised very early on, kind of as we got married, as we dreamed about a ministry life, of moving towards financial freedom so that we could give our time to ministry and be self-funded. That's been a dream we've always had. And so we were just catalysed in that moment to start making some decisions that we didn't know what the end goal would be, but we knew that we could take like one next step. And so that has actually led us, we thought it was going to be like a straight line, but I would describe it as like a curvy, meandering line as I feel like God's kind of shuffled us, a little bit side to side. We've kind of taken one step forward, made a decision, and then, it's felt like God's pushed us a little bit in the other direction. I have found that emotionally hard to deal with. However, it has definitely greatly deepened my trust in God.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the post-sabbatical experience has been almost the antithesis of the sabbatical. So what was very stable and slow through the sabbatical season, now we're very it's an acceleration and volatile kind of landscape that we're in. So it's very different. And I think one of my reflections was that it was as though that was coming anyway. That volatility and that explosive kind of decision making and that instability and all of that was coming. Whether we didn't know that was coming, but God did, and it was as though God kind of gave us that rest so that we could be ready to, carry all this complexity toward the end of the year.
Well, and if I could just quickly interject, what I was going to say before, which I just said a whole lot of other random stuff, was that we began to see that prophetic word that had been spoken over us during the sabbatical, about halfway through, about a period of rest to run. We were like, wow, we are living in the running now.
Yeah, but at the same time, I know personally I've had to be very self-disciplined to not push things, because that would have been my temptation beforehand, would have been to just be pretty aggressively moving towards something that would have brought an outcome that we're looking for. And so I've had to work very hard to be restrained in this last little season, particularly as things have been quite up and down. Like you said, we'd make a decision to, move to a particular goal that we'd like to see executed by the end of the year. And then, it might look like it's a big green light. And then a week later, it's like, no, that's the wrong direction. So it's like, oh, wow, that's massively frustrating. So we've been, your question was, how would I describe that, or how's that felt? So it's been pretty full on, but at the same time, I've been grateful that we've had the room in our emotional tank to be able to accommodate that, because, I think pre-sabbatical that, this would have just been beyond us.
Yeah. Would have taken us out.
And also I don't think we would have necessarily believed that we would have had the capacity to embark upon something, significant at this stage of life. But I think the thing that God sowed into our lives during the sabbatical was, and you said it was like a trust in Him, a deep trust, so we can believe God for, big miraculous things in our life. And also, I think God sowed into us the capacity for more of Him and His activity and His expression in through our ministry, as opposed to us just being busier and doing more and trying to achieve more. So I think one of the things that I've seen in this last 3 months, and I'll refer to it later, is just God in my mind and in my heart has gotten a whole lot larger. Like God's faithfulness and His ability to, just to turn up, and His presence is just so much more salient. Like I just see God present in so much of what's been happening, even in the really disappointing things that have happened. Like you said, a roller coaster. So there's been, I remember you talked about, selling an investment. So, we thought we'd sell an investment, then we thought, no, we'll keep it, and then we thought, no, we'll sell it. And so, and during that time, like I've been having to do work on that, property. I remember coming home one night after doing some work there and just laying in bed, and I was like really disappointed and discouraged and like numb. And I would never have been able to describe it like this before the sabbatical, that despite emotionally feeling completely numb, I just felt like the weight of God was on that whole situation. Like I could just, I think C.S. Lewis describes it as the weight of glory. It's like this salient presence it's not necessarily expressed in circumstances. Like it's not like, oh, well, that's happened, so therefore God did this and God did that. It's like God's there, like in the discouragement and the disappointment and the heartbreak, you're still very close to God and still very grateful for Him to be with you. Even though you're saying, God, why haven't you? Even though you're saying, God, this is what you've asked us to do and we're going after it, we're doing what you've said we'll do. And we're not rushing, we're not running, we're not being pushed, we're not pushing others, we're doing all the things we feel like we should be doing. Doesn't seem like all the things are working as though we'd like them to work. So you shake your fist at heaven, but at the same time, God's present. And I think that's kind of a new experience. Maybe a new experience for me, but yeah, that's kind of a reflection on the current season, the last 3 months. It's been a bit up and down and all over the place, but still, I think the sabbatical has meant that it's been quite, like I've experienced God in a new way because of the 2 months that we had.
Yeah, well, and you were sharing with me this week, and you don't have to go into more detail about this if you don't want to, but that you had the opportunity to reflect that what's been happening since the end of the sabbatical, and with some of the disappointments where we thought that, this was the right path and actively pursuing and going a long way. There's a couple of these things that are big, significant things, projects that we're working on that we're really hoping to get across the line by kind of next year, for our financial provision and also for the empowerment of some of these dreams that we're dreaming for the next 7-year period of productivity, where we've gone a long way down a path, and then it looks like maybe it'll just all fall over, and we won't, and having to trust God that He's got us and He's our ultimate provider, and what's really most important. You were reflecting to me that you're kind of getting to see God in a whole new way that you've never known Him before.
Correct.
Okay, so you don't want to...
I'm saving it up till the end.
Okay, sorry.
Because you said I've got a question at the end, and I was like, oh,
okay.
I've
gotcha.
Remember, it's my journal,
yes,
my journal entry that
Yeah.
I'm taking a leaf out of your journal writing book, and I've got a few little notes here.
Finally rubbed off on you.
A few little notes here to read later on once we get a chance.
Well, for me to... to briefly share, because I actually haven't journaled recently. I've got a journal here from the middle of October.
Oh, very slack.
And it was a Sunday morning where we got back home from our ACC state conference in Port Macquarie, and I got COVID. I went to 2 ACC conferences this year. Got COVID both times.
So did every other minister in Australia.
Yeah. So that it turns out there was a reason why they shut us down in the middle of all that. You do get sick when
Lots
you're
of
around a bunch
cuddling and
of
kissing and high-fiving at conferences.
Small groups of people all praying together in each other's faces in a loud room. Anyway, so I'm home from church.
Conference.
Home from conference, but I was home from church on a Sunday morning, which is very unusual for me.
Oh, because you were sick.
Because I was sick.
Oh, right.
And I had suspected COVID.
Right.
And I was really
that's right.
struggling. I had a rough week.
Some might say you were on Struggle Street.
Sure, I was on Struggle Village,
on the corner
town,
of Struggle
city.
Street and COVID Avenue.
Yeah, exactly. So not only did I feel physically unwell, but I was emotionally very low. And I was really struggling with this whole, God, where are you taking us? We've only kind of got until the end of the year to sort some of these ideas, dreams, goals, plans out, or else I don't know what's going to happen. And we felt like, there was favour and blessing on this one thing that was meant to be happening that week, and then it had all fallen over within 24 hours, and I was really struggling with a decision that we'd made, and have we made the wrong decision? And I'm starting to, the process of the journaling that day helped me to realise that I was kind of seeing God as like a genie in a bottle. Like if we didn't kind of do things the right way, then his hand of favour and blessing and provision would be lifted from us. And the process of writing it all down and feeling like emotionally haywire and all over the shop helped me to go, hang on a minute, I'm looking at God all wrong. And so what I wrote was, I came across this thing on Instagram which pointed me to a preach from somebody who I follow, which I watched, and it was all about being held in God's good hands. Our lives are held in God's good hands. And I was like, yeah, that's right. God is going to provide for us. And, maybe it's not going to look like how I've imagined that it's going to look, but it will be sure, and it will be safe, and it will be secure. And then you were preaching, and I was watching our church online.
Oh, thank you.
Because I wasn't at church.
Yeah.
And you were, I don't actually remember exactly what you were preaching. But
one of my best sermons, I imagine.
What I took away from it was you were preaching about faithfulness. And I've written in my journal, yeah, that's right. Like, we are faithful, and sure, we make mistakes all the time. And what if we did make what if this decision that we made this week, which is the one I was really wrestling over, what if it was a really wrong decision? But our hearts were right, and we've been faithful. And so we can expect God's continued blessing and provision because we're faithful to him. And we're human and frail and make mistakes all the time. But our heart is to honour God and put him first in our lives and trust him for his provision. So that's where I'm just kind of telling that story to point to the ups and downs emotionally and the not knowing what's next and what's around the corner. And now we're only 3 weeks from the end of the year. We still don't have anything concrete in place.
It's not very long.
For next year.
By the time this podcast comes out, we'll be 2 weeks from the end of the year.
I know. What's the bet? As soon as we finish recording this podcast, we'll get the breakthrough we've been praying for.
Episode 8.1.
Anyway, so we're fine. But it's been, I just wanted people to hear, because I think it's helpful, that it's not just all, I thought coming out of that sabbatical, all the miraculous things that happened, that it would just be a straight line, like miracle after miracle. And I've been reminded through the process that that's not actually helpful to us as humans, to just have everything go well all the time and the way that we expect all the time. It doesn't deepen our relationship with God. We just take him for granted. And there's not really any miracle in that. The miracle is us learning how to be faithful more deeply over the course of a lifetime. So I think that's what we've been pushed into. So we're wrapping up. So the question is, and I'll answer first and I'll let you finish, and then I wonder if we should just pray for people at the end of the episode as to finish it off, people who've been listening. But
that's right. I was going to say something about the people who have been listening before when you mentioned the 8.1 and finding out what's happening next and everything. Because I was just thinking, I've been surprised by how many people have been engaging with this our sabbatical story. I thought we might have had a handful of people who were interested, but it's been quite surprising how many people are actually listening and watching this story.
yeah,
And so, we want to keep you up to date. Because it's not just people in our immediate world who would be seeing us face to face. It's many other people outside of our
Yeah, we've got no idea who they are.
Oh, yeah. Well, some people we do.
Yeah.
Who have reached out and said, we're really enjoying listening to that and, looking forward to hearing what's coming up next. So, unfortunately, we don't have anything for you today. There's nothing next. But there might be something next very soon. And then we'll let you know and you can jump into the 8.1. Anyway, sorry. Yes, you're going to wrap it up with your... What is it? What's kind of the...
So the question is...
Yeah, what's the question?
Reflecting back to that first question about who you wanted to be,
right?
Who's post sabbatical me going to be
mm-hmm.
from September through when we first came back to work,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and now 3 months later,
are you still
post sabbatical me?
Mm.
So for me, I'll answer first.
Yes or no? Go.
I think definitely yes on the trusting in God. Like that's just continued to go deeper and deeper. And so I'm not actually, it's unusual for me, but I'm not worried about the future. I'm genuinely not worried about our provision, what the plans are for next year, how we're spending our time.
You're stealing all my thoughts there.
Sorry.
No, go for it. That's fine.
And the other thing about the little moments...
You're still getting those, though.
Well, I was just going to say, my one little thing is you and I were sitting on the porch last night of our house, our main mansion, and just sitting out the front step, which we'd cleaned, which is very unusual for us, looking at our Christmas lights and enjoying people coming past, looking at our lit nativity. And we were talking about what's next, and we were like, well, we don't know, because we did something yesterday that was pretty significant. We started signing some documents yesterday which were pretty significant. And we got halfway through, like it's just such a funny thing. We got halfway through signing these documents that are about a big plan that we have for next year, and the document, it was a DocuSign thing, and they were all shambolic.
The identities all around the wrong way.
Yeah, they had your name in the, like I had to sign under your name, you had to sign under my name. And we were like, what, this is hilarious. And so we had to tell the people that sent us the documents, and they all have to be changed. And so we're sitting there going, what is going on?
And we were actually saying, let's think about what else could we do? Like let's have another big...
Let's have a different idea.
Yeah, let's have another big... Anyway, so because I guess we were just unsure. And
well, we still don't know what's going to happen entirely.
Yeah,
However, literally, and this is what I've noticed about listening back to these episodes, I have said literally a lot. But I think it's also because we've been watching Parks and Recreation, and there's a character on there who says literally all the time. So sorry, guys, for the literallys. But as we were having that conversation, the kookaburras just started singing just out of the evening silence and so loudly. And it's like there's a community of them living in the bushland near our house now. Listening to us because... and we both looked at each other. We just sat and listened to the kookaburras. And we just thought...
Well, when they hear the sounds of doubt, they laugh because they know. They must know better than we do.
It's a nice line. So we're not making an idol out of the kookaburras, but we just feel like God's sent them to be near us. Like we never heard them before, and now we hear them all the time. They obviously do live near us, near our main mansion, and I just feel like God uses them to remind me that He's still got us. So still getting those signs. Over to you.
So that's your final reflection?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a lot of pressure now.
Well, I think I'll just...
This is the last thing people are going to hear about.
I'll jump to the end. So I've got some comments there about what I felt as though God was speaking to me about in terms of ministry life, leadership, and family, which I think I might have even mentioned in previous episodes. So I might not go to that.
I don't remember because I don't know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's about the next 7 years. We talked about the next 7 years, 2030, the year of Jubilee. And I really felt like during the sabbatical, and again, it's that whole thing for me of bringing things down to something that's very simple. And so I had three main focuses post-sabbatical that I wanted to be, active in. And one of them was my study. Because again, it was about the sabbatical too was about coming out of that post-sabbatical me, not just about not being rushed and being and not pushing, but also about clarity. I didn't want to be doing things that were just filler.
Yes.
Or non-productive, if I wasn't going to be rushed, it meant that the things that I was going to put my hand to needed to be the most meaningful things that I could do, and not do things that were secondary or less important. And so one of the things that I was going to be committing to was my study, my Master of Theology, which I actually just this week had my final meeting with my academic supervisor for the year to wrap it up, and got my final grade.
Which was a HD, everybody.
That's right, thank you.
20 credit point subject.
Yeah, I know, that's a win. So big shout out to you, Adam White, if you're listening. Dr. Adam White. So that was a focus. The other one was focusing on raising the next generation of leaders. So the one-on-one mentoring, leadership development for our church life and ministry life to be able to continue beyond us. That's a big focus. And then the third one was around our own personal financial legacy for our family, for our kids, and setting that up for the generations to come, which we've talked about in this podcast. And then so as I was reflecting on the end of the year, I was writing and on what we've been talking about, the turbulent nature of it. So I wrote this. I said, it is a great feeling to begin to wrap up 2023. It has been and still is a wild and unpredictable year. It has been a year full of rest and yet full of running. It has been full of big God moments and days of desperate God, where are you tears. The year is not over yet, but I want to remember that the sabbatical was a serious season of recalibration that refocused my ministry and personal life in a very fresh and very new way. As Rach and I stepped out of our sabbatical, we stepped straight into a season that we thought might unfold across the next decade. But within days, it became clear that it wouldn't take years for us to step into this next season of life and ministry. God brought it to us in one moment. We were rested so we could run. We have been running ever since we stepped back into our post-sabbatical world. As I'm journaling this, I'm finding some clarity amongst the chaos that still swirls around in this season of abrupt change. I will be investing into some of the dreams that will release financial favour into our family and into our children's